Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And gang, we've got a show for you, okay? Uh, for those of you who don't know, on Monday, a bill passed the House called the Antisemitism Awareness Act. It was a largely bipartisan legislation passed with 390 votes amongst both Democrats and Republicans voted for it. Only 90 opposed, I believe it was. 70 Democrats and 20 Republicans, something like that. But basically what the act does, and we'll get into it as we discuss, but what the act does is it defines anti-Semitism. Why is that important? Because of things like Title IX in academia and universities and schools. One of the classes that are protected are ethnic and religious groups, right? And so there's been a lot of discussion recently with the college protests on what is anti-Semitism. And so the House has passed this bill in order to define it. The question becomes, is that definition going to be helpful or hurtful? Is this going to help with helping Jews feel more safe on campus? Or is this simply an attack on free speech? We're going to get into it. We got a great guest list for you today. We have one more coming. He's going to be a little late, but I'll be filling in for him until he gets here. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to my counterparts, and we're going to start with the 𝕵𝖎𝖙, and we're going to end with Ali. Go ahead, Dami.
Oh, all right. I'm the 𝕵𝖎𝖙. My position is it is a good thing. There are a lot of basically I boil it down to it's not really a threat on the freedom of speech. The freedom of speech is an oh my goodness. Let me grab this. Sorry, I didn't expect to go first. All right, so yeah, it's pretty much it's not a threat on the freedom of speech. It actually states explicitly that it can't be used to take away somebody to go against somebody's freedom of speech. And I think defining anti-Semitism was a very important thing that kind of addresses the issues that we've seen in the past, more recent, like super recently with Harvard and the colleges specifically. I'm gonna pass it on. It's a pretty simple
It's fine.
position.
We'll get into it as we go. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'm sure we will have a great discussion on this. Brianna Wu, what you got?
So, look, I'm going to get real with you guys. Directionally, I support this bill. I think it is very helpful for the United States to have a official definition of anti-Semitism. I think you can look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and see how, generally speaking, directionally, it's been very helpful for this country to tackle issues of structural racism in this country. And ironically, parts of that legislation actually made it easier for women, specifically Title IX. So I think it's actually really surprising, or at least I found it surprising, that we did not have an official definition of this for so long. I'm sure today, as we're talking about it, this comes from the National Holocaust Memorial. Is that correct, Wick? The definition that they have there, it's got some really problematic stuff there, specifically linking criticism of Israel's foreign policy with anti-Semitism. I think that's too broad. I don't agree with that, but that's also not in the bill. So I think what we have to ask ourselves is, like any piece of legislation, generally speaking, is this moving us in the right direction, or is it moving us in the wrong direction? Important to remember, this has not been adopted by the Senate yet, and more importantly, our courts, which interpret free speech very broadly, they've not gotten involved with this either. So, I think Jewish students are under attack, as the bill says. I think we need to be taking anti-Semitism very seriously, and I actually think this is a good, if flawed, piece of legislation.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. We will get into it as we go. There's a lot being said. Well, again, we'll save it for the group discussion. Ali, what you got?
Yeah, I thought everyone kind of already knew what anti-Semitism was or wasn't. I don't know that we needed it to be like legally defined. I am surprised that it's not, to be fair. I thought it already was. But if this is just a bill to like say, hey, this is what anti-Semitism is, this is the definition, sure, but it feel like it's a bill that's going to be passed that suppress what things people can say under the guise of anti-Semitism, which has just been the largest buzzword, especially over the past like few months. I've heard it nonstop, and so like it just seems like it's just another way to try to silence certain people from saying certain things because we don't like what's being said. But
So,
we can.
so can I challenge that directly, like respectfully? Like, let's get into it. So, you can read the bill yourself. I think all of us agree, like, you should have any right to say what you want to say. What this bill is intended to do specifically is, I think we'd all agree that everyone should have access to public education or access to schools where federal dollars are involved. To give you a really specific example, my school, Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, had a really famous race riot in the Grove where black people were trying to get enrolled there. Racist white people didn't want black people going to Ole Miss, and the National Guard had to get involved. In the same way, the intention of this legislation, just to be really clear what we're talking about here, it is to where if students repeatedly if schools repeatedly do not take threats to their Jewish students seriously, they can potentially have their federal dollars withheld. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. Like if I don't want my tax dollars going to an institution that, repeatedly discriminating against black people or men for that instance, right? Or women. So like understanding like the actual language of the bill, do you still have that problem with it?
I don't necessarily have a problem, but I just don't understand what a threat to a Jewish student is that's different than like a threat to any student. A threat is a threat.
Well, anti-Semitism looks different. Like different kinds of oppression look different for different people. I'll give you a really good example. Shireen Mitchell, who's someone I worked with a lot during the Gamergate era, she worked on policies with Twitter that black people were getting pictures of crosses on fire sent to them. And Twitter had no official policy behind the scenes to say, oh, this is obviously like calling for a lynching. This is obviously some hate speech meant to intimidate black people. So the kinds of images that would be interpreted as very racist, it kind of does require a little bit of specialized knowledge to do that. And I think in that same way, having a formal definition of anti-Semitism, I think it's really helpful for us to kind of understand what this looks like so we can make public policy about it.
So, Ollie's buddy isn't here, so I'm going to jump in a little bit
Sure.
and steelman his side, if I may. So the issue here that I have with the bill specifically is the definition that they're giving. So in the bill, in the definition section, it's very clear that it uses the IHRA, which is the Holocaust Memorial Museum, the International. I don't know their full name, right? But it links to it, right? And it gives you what this definition is, right? And you can go to the website of the IHRA, and it also, again, in section 2 of section 4 or part 2 of section 4, I don't know how, you know what I mean, right? It includes, it says this, it includes.
I've got it open right here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it includes the contemporary examples of anti-Semitism identified in the IHRA definition. And then when you go to their website and you look at what some of those are, as you mentioned in your opening statement, a lot of them are things like being
drawing
critical of Israel.
comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of Nazis. I don't agree with that. That's a free speech issue.
But this is in the bill, right? And this is why I think that the bill, like, you can say that we need a bill like this, fair, but this bill itself isn't it. The definition is far too broad. I think the definition is, and the examples that they say they use are just not anti-Semitism. And I think for that reason alone, I oppose the bill. But I want to get your response, and I want to make sure that Dami gets a chance too. So go ahead.
Yeah, and Dami, please just jump in wherever you want to here. Okay, I think we agree on the second to last one, but like you say very broadly, this is too broad. What other examples here? I'm saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. and I think we agree one of them is not great. What are the other ones that you would
Sure.
have a problem with here?
There's two main ones that I
Sure.
think are pretty bad. The drawing comparisons of contemporary Israel policy, we already mentioned that one.
To the
then
Nazis,
applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. They're referring here to Israel, and this is too dicey. It's far too dicey. It like a double. Like, I think that we should hold different nations to different standards.
Really?
I think, for example, I hold the United States to a different standard than I do Russia in general behavior. I think that isn't anti-Russianism or anti-USAism. It's just too broad.
There's no
That's
word
a
for it.
thing, yeah.
To be against a nation, there's like no word, especially if you're not like it. Like, I could understand if all you ever heard was anti-Jewish rhetoric, and that's all that people are complaining about. But people complain about the anti-Israeli rhetoric, and it's just like hard. It's like that. I don't get why we can't complain about another nation. I don't see why we can't do that.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't see the issue.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So a couple things. One, with the broadness of this. The alternative to this and what we were at before was we would use this stuff, or the institutions would use this, or they would choose between two other options. So this is actually narrowing the options and the definition versus what it was before. Also, as far as for the specifically naming out Jewish people or anti-Semitism, we have a long history of when there's a group of people that are facing a problem, that isn't covered with a specific rule that already exists. We do happen to name out the specific group of people: African Americans, women. There was some version. I'm not read up on the Asian version of this, but there was legislation passed to protect Asians, I think specifically after we did some
Do we have an Islamophobia bill?
No, we should.
An Islamophobia awareness bill? All right, then, like,
yeah.
Then I'd like an Islamophobia awareness. I mean, like, yeah, if that's the case, then
so the
we
way
should be pushing.
I would benefit from that.
Are you gonna have the same push?
Hold on, one at a time. One at a time.
So I agree with you. Like, me reading this, I think, maybe this is the difference in our perspective, because me reading this, it's actually helpful for me to think through every one of these examples and do exactly what Wick is doing here. Like, really think about it critically if this is helpful. I would love for there to be a federal legislation like for this on Islamophobia. I would really encourage those groups to bring it forward. I think I would call my congressman and ask him to sign that. But Wick, just to give some pushback, because I don't want to move off of this, you were talking about having a contention with this thing that, like, holding different countries to different standards is anti-Semitism. At least let me steelman that. I'm not 100% sure I agree on this, but I can tell you how I think Jewish people feel based on what I've heard over the last 7 months. So you can look at the standards Israel is being held to with the Hamas-Israel war, and the truth is the civilian casualties are actually lower than a lot of armed conflicts per capita, right? But yet Israel is held to this really, really high standard where it's called a Holocaust almost immediately. With every single part of this, it really feels like there is this this propaganda effort that's ready to go to seize on anything Israel does in really bad faith and portray it in the worst light possible.
I agree with you.
I think you can see this pattern and see how it could potentially be anti-Semitic.
No, if your argument is that people have used this as a shield to be anti-Semitic, right? And they use the word Zionist, but we all know what they really mean. I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. But my problem is, if we want to fight this, we got to make sure that the cure isn't worse than the disease. And I think that this is what does. It's like if we had an Islamophobia bill where it said that criticism of Iran was Islamophobic. No one would accept that. That would be wild to say, right? Like, And this is what I feel like in the context of how this act is coming forward and the definitions that it is pointing to, outside definitions that are reference to outside institutions, right? Which is another problem. It becomes an issue. And I think that we can recognize that there's a real problem of anti-Semitism on campuses.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But we can just also say this isn't the step forward. In fact, it might in fact be a step back, because what this does, and if I may finish real quick, what this does is it makes it look like we've solved it, but we haven't done that at all. And it's like
Sure.
empty calories. We feel full, but it's not tackling the root of the issue. Anyway,
Sure.
carry on.
So
Go ahead.
ahead.
Whichever one wants.
So I was just going to say, Wick, I really hear what you're saying there, and I think that's fair. Two things. So one, the Senate is going to have a chance to clean this up, as I understand this, and I would actually encourage them to move away from a third-party groups, like use their basis of this to like work on this. I would have no issue whatsoever. Just chop out those two examples. It'll make it stronger. So I think that's fine. So you know, it's very normal for this kind of legislation to go through the Senate and to get worked on, then get passed back to the House. But I think the more important part of this is, you know, Congress passes bills all the time, and then judicial review happens, and we kind of figure out which parts of this hold up to constitutional levels. I think particularly the example of Israel does not pass my free speech test. It is absolutely true that directionally, our court system is wildly in favor of free speech, as it should be. So I hear what you're saying about that criticism. Yeah, I would like it to be addressed afterwards, but I think you could have a high degree of confidence that if this did pass in this form, the courts would not ratify that part of it.
I hear you, but I think that if they came out with a better bill, I'd be in support of it. They just haven't. And while it might be in the future corrected or fixed, it isn't yet. And again, I don't trust the institutions to do it when they have a faulty foundation like this. And I think this is a faulty foundation. I think that if we want to get this passed and done, we need to do it right, and this ain't it. And there is a danger, right? There is a danger, especially during the context of how this is coming out. And I want to pivot to this for a moment. This is coming out in light of the college campus protests, right? This is coming out in light of the discourse surrounding Israel. I think that the politicians, right, this is their goal, is to silence criticism of Israel. It just is. Now,
Do you think so?
I think
don't
for a
agree.
lot of them,
Yeah,
not for
that's
all of
all.
them, but go ahead.
That's what a lot of the bill is saying. It's what I'm reading on the website. It's just like, it just seems like you can't say anything about Israel or anything that, like, if you think Israel's doing anything wrong, if you say it's racist, you can't say that. If you compare it to like Nazis, why aren't we able to do these things? I don't understand. As Americans, as if you're an American and I'm making fun of another nation, or I'm saying anything about another nation, that should have no bearing on you here. Like, people can say anything they want about Lebanon. We can eliminate Palestine off the map, and we don't consider it as like anti-Arab or Islamophobic or any of these things. We can reduce Palestinians to Hamas. We can do the whole thing. None of these things are Islamophobic. It's just, is what we're engaging in because the other side's engaging. So if it, like, I don't see what this bill is doing.
So
Other than trying to
that's
limit the
actually-
speech of certain people. That's all I see.
Go ahead,
That's-
Dami.
That's actually a really important question. What is this bill doing? And like,
Mm.
what we're actually thinking about is something that the bill's not only not designed to do, and that it explicitly states that it can't be used to do that.
But it will, though. If someone's anti-Semitic and you're on campus, that's means to lose a scholarship. That means to get kicked off of campus. That means to potentially not be able to go to classes and continue going to school. Like, they can kick you out of school. These are all things, like, if you're racist, they could potentially do that.
No, this
Right?
is
Yes, they can.
Yeah, and by making anti-Semitism such a broad term to where I can't say anything about Israel, no, I'm super straight on that. If I'm
No,
threatening Jewish
hold-
individuals
no, so,
for
okay.
being Jewish for their
Bro.
Judaism,
all right,
that's
listen.
anti-Semitism.
Dami, then Wu. Go ahead.
The right to free speech does not mean the right to have your institution federally funded. If you're saying things in opposition to the government, that the government, they're not obligated to pay you to do that. But it's not for us as the individual. It's for the institution to not to be to ensure that the institutions are protecting each of us in a way that makes it so we're all safe and comfortable in the same way. And the only way that this can be acted on is to withdraw funding, and that's not even the first option.
Just real quick, I'll get to the super chats at the top of the hour, gang. Keep giving me money. I will read them. Sorry, just need to make a little money. Continue.
The first option, and what they try to do is they try to get voluntary compliance. If you don't comply, meaning if you don't fix the issue of whatever environment or decisions that you are making as an institution that is in opposition to the whole idea of everybody gets the same fair shake.
But will this do that?
And they can pull the funding.
That's the question. Will this do that? I don't think it will.
I mean, it has for how many years? For other people.
Okay, I think we're all proceeding on a false assumption. So let me tell everyone a little story that happened at Ole Miss while I was attending there. There was a really famous scandal where a bunch of frat boys were living in one of our dorms. I think it was Kincaid. And they were a bunch of, frankly, white supremacists, right? So they were intimidating one of the black students in the hallways, like just imagine all the racism, like all the slurs, all that kind of stuff. And they were eventually though they were kicked out of the dorm, and eventually they were suspended from Ole Miss. I don't remember if they came back or not. So if you look at this bill here's three things. These are things at the top. Calling for or justifying the killing and harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoings committed by a single Jewish person or group. So I want for you to imagine that situation in the same way. You've got a bunch of anti-Semites. They're living on a floor with a Jewish student. The Jewish student is just trying to get a damned education, and you've got a bunch of people on that floor. They're like, Jews run the world, Jews do this, blah, blah, blah. I think the Holocaust is, you needed to get Holocausted more, just all that garbage, right? That's going to affect that Jewish person's ability to get an education the same way that Ole Miss had access issues for black people trying to get an education to get ahead in life. So, I do think that's a situation where the university does have a role to step in and make sure that as a learning institution, it can function. It's not saying you can't talk about ideas. It's saying that the school itself has a responsibility to keep students safe.
So
didn't Ole Miss just have the frat dude with the monkey sounds at the black lady?
Yeah, that's the exact school. Those are Ole Miss frat boys. They've behaved there my entire life. I was very non-surprised to see that clip.
So
yeah,
no, finish your point. But I have two things I want to say. Go ahead.
I was gonna say if a bill was passed and we're still not protecting, but is he suspended from the school? People are standing behind him saying they don't want him suspended, and so you agree that he should be just suspended from the school, right? And that's because he attacked the woman for being black and he was racist directly.
It was really over the top. It was really over the top and racist.
And so I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you
I
agree with you that if you attack a student for being Jewish directly, or if you say some direct, but once again, I don't think criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. I don't think criticism of another country. So if people draw correlations to Israel and the Holocaust or whatever this may be, I don't see how that's anti-Semitic, and that's what the bill's proposing. That's why I'm just
why do you have to keep leaping? Hold on. Why do you have to keep leaping to this respectfully as a conclusion that there's no evidence that that's what is in this bill? There's a whole bunch of evidence. You can read the text. It's 3 pages. It's not complicated. That the structure of this bill is to protect students' access the exact same way we protected access for women and black people. Why do you constantly take this catastrophic interpretation of it? Wick and I are already agreeing. Hold on. Wick and I are already agreeing Wick and I are already agreeing that this needs to be worked out, and an ideal version would look different on a few points. But you're constantly leaping to this assumption that it's going to kill free speech, and I don't think there's evidence for that.
So, if I may interject, because I'm going to push back against you, 𝕵𝖎𝖙.
Please.
Two things. Imagine a scenario where we make it where someone who is a patriotic American goes to one of these colleges, right? Everyone in these colleges are very critical of the United States, very critical of their involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, very critical of involvement in foreign policies, on a wide level of domestic policies of the police state, etc. All these things, right? It would probably make that person who's very patriotic American, who really loves their country, pretty uncomfortable. Because of their discomfort, should we make it into law or legislation that colleges that do not punish students who criticize not Israel but the U.S., should they get their funding taken away? I don't think so. And much in the same way, I think that a Jewish person going to campus, yes, it's going to make them uncomfortable, especially if they're Israeli, to hear criticisms of Israel. And yes, that's not ideal, but I think that making it illegal to have these criticisms of Israel, and hell, I'll even go so far as to say Zionists who aren't Israeli, right? I think that doing that is going to be a cure worse than the disease. I think it is a fundamental freedom that people have the right, college students especially, should have the right to be like, to have these ideas, to discuss these ideas. And I worry, my concern is that it will be taking away people, it will have a chilling effect on speech, right? They won't feel like they will be able to speak their mind and call out bad actors, whether real or imagined, right? Like, I don't know. I honestly...
So I'm going to challenge you back on that.
Go ahead.
Challenge my assertion. Do you have the bill open in front of you? Please go to page 5 and have page 6 open in front of you. So
page
read right
6?
here.
Hold on, give me a second.
So read at the top of page 5. The Department of Education shall take into consideration the definition of anti-Semitism as part of the department's assessment of whether the practice was motivated by anti-Semitic intent. So just keep that in mind. It's not trying to challenge ideas. The thing is, if the behavior itself was motivated by anti-Semitic intent. And more importantly, you as a free speech guy, Wick, you're going to love the last 2 lines. So if you look at provision B in part 3, constitutional protections. Nothing in this act shall be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. That's pretty goddamn strong language right there.
Sure.
So I think the intention of the bill here is extremely clear.
Go ahead, Dami, and then I'll respond. Yeah.
And to add to that, on the IHRA's website, right before you get to the... By the way, I do disagree with not having our own definition and like outsourcing the definition. I would be perfectly fine with taking the text and applying it and putting it into the law, just because outsourcing seems kind of iffy. But right above where they start saying accusing that, like the contemporary examples, they specifically say manifestations might include the targeting of the state of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. However, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic.
See?
Anti-Semitism frequently charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity, and it is often used to blame Jews for why things go wrong. It is expressed in speech, writing, visual forms, action. That part, yeah.
So my frustration with this, right? My big pushback to both of you here is that there is there are 2 levels to this. 1, how the bill is written, right? And 2, how it is put into practice. And I see this as a weapon that has been formed to attack people who are very critical of Zionism and in that method. And I think that this is how it will be used. So regardless of it saying, hey, criticism of Israel's fine, but then you have these examples, right? These specific examples that call into question the legitimacy of their commitment to that statement, means I don't trust it. means I don't trust them to know what is going to be valid criticism in Israel and what's not. I think that it's far too vague, this 𝕖𝖓 definition. The examples, especially the bill specifically including these examples, does call into question how this is going to be applied. And I don't trust these institutions enough to give them that much latitude. I think if we're going to do something like this, and I have some problems with doing anything like this in general, but I have much less problems with like a more clear and more concise and more workshopped thing. Like, again, if we had our specific definition that I could work with, that I could look at, that doesn't include these bad things, if we remove them, we can have a conversation. I might be on board with it. But as of now, as of today, how it passed the House, I just cannot support this. I just can't.
So are you not in support of the other elements of what is this 42? What the heck am I looking for? So for example, in there they lay out some pretty vague ideas about like marital status and the parenting status, the status of your parents.
What are you referring to exactly?
So things that cannot be
No,
discriminated.
what document are you referencing? Just so I can.
This is, what is it? 42. Sorry, I don't have it up. It's.
So, Wick, while he looks for that, let me ask you point blank. So it feels like through your example, and look, I'm not trying to do the radical leftist thing of make you like accusing you of being racist, but it's a genuine question. So let's say you're in Mississippi, the Civil Rights Act has just passed, and the Department of Education had to get actually extremely involved in really adjudicating what was and wasn't racist, just like during integration, right? As I was going to school, even in the 90s, they had to go to every single classroom and write on the board for everyone to see how many whites were in the classroom, how many blacks were in the classroom, and then a judge's clerk had to come by, look at that, write it all down, and pass it off to be reviewed. Like, there are a lot of parts of that, the process of integration that did clamp down on free speech. So would you equally have a problem with those measures if you were in 1964?
Sure. So one of the things that we had in 1964 is groups being denied access to different institutions and different things based on their ethnicity, skin color, gender in some cases, right? And all these things. I think that's a fundamentally different situation for what we have today with, as your earlier example said, Jewish people simply feeling uncomfortable because people on the campus have been critical of even Jews in general, right? Like, I think I'll go so far as to make this hot take. I don't think it should be illegal for a student, right, to just be anti-Jewish. I think it's disgusting that they are, but I don't think it should. I don't think it should be punishable, right? And I think not in the terms of the academic institutions and things like that. I think their punishment should come from being socially shunned and having the results.
The peers will end up punishing them.
Yeah,
That's what you want.
I think it gets into problematic areas when we start, and I believe this with gender and race in general too, when we start putting into practice legislation that takes away funding and punishes institutions if they don't crack down on on thought crime, basically. And again, by no means, if I may finish, just real quick, if I may finish. And again, by no means am I saying that these things are good. In fact, I've been pretty on record saying that these campus protesters are retarded. But I don't think that they should be, like, I don't know, punished. Go ahead.
So just to make sure we're talking about the same thing here, no one is punishing anyone for thought crime. And exactly as this bill said, there's nothing in here that denies your First Amendment right in the United States. Look, you're my buddy, but I find this to be a little bit of an intellectual dodge. We're talking about behavior, extreme behavior that makes it difficult for people to access higher education. So, like, think about an example where here's one. So think about a situation on campus, like campus rape happens. It's just a reality. You get out students, you get alcohol, people, like sexual assault is going to happen. If a school repeatedly had a system that was broken, where they were not looking at rape allegations seriously and taking action, like you would agree with me, yes, that would create a situation where it would be difficult for women to get a higher education, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so in the same way, look at the bill itself. You're going to a very extreme example, but the thing in the bill itself is talking about behavior that makes it difficult for students to access higher education. So I think you're arguing that there's a much lower standard, and I don't think there's proof for that. And just one more thing, you were using this very vague terminology here. So you started originally with your point talking you didn't trust Congress's intent in passing this law. Fine, I have a difference of opinion with you on that. I think politicians do what's in their best interest, and I think they just genuinely saw anti-Semitism, and I think their constituents wanted an answer for it, and I think that's how democracy works. You have a different assessment. You think it's about shutting down discussion on campus. Fine, but it's not Congress that is adjudicating this. Read the bill. It's every single school's board that handles these kinds of matters. They're the ones who are going to be doing that. When the court does judicial review on that, it's going to be the judicial system not looking at Congress's intent, but looking at the text of this bill. So I feel like you're going to this really wild Orwellian place, and again, I just don't think there's evidence for
Sure. Well, I'll push back on a couple points, right?
Sure.
So I think that you're correct that it will be the judicial system who will legislate this, but what will happen, as we've seen happen before they changed the Title IX stuff, and then after, like we had the Title IX change discussion a few weeks ago. I don't know who in my audience saw that, but it's very. It was very eye-opening, and you should go watch that.
There were some problems
when
with
you get
that,
time.
100%.
One of those problems is that it opens up for class action lawsuits against these universities and things like that. And much like we saw before in the before times, right? There will be a glut of lawsuits that are brought. It will tie up the courts. It will slow down an already bloated process. It's going to have after effects, much like this bill, right? This Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. By doing this definition, if it gets passed as it is, there is going to be so much legislation that's going to glut up the system, and it's going to be a problem. And I understand if it was things like access to schools, if it was things like access to scholarships and institutions, then I would think it would be worth it. But since it's not that, and what it's talking about is taking away funding for schools if they don't sufficiently punish anti-Semitism, right, as defined by this bill, then I think that that's not worth it. Does that make sense, at least?
It makes sense to you. Show me where it, why I think this would be eliminated. Where in the bill does it talk about the purpose of this as far as quote unquote punishing people? Like, where does it say that?
Okay,
show me the place in the bill that backs up that claim. Because I see it talking about Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I see it talking about discrimination against Jews. That is on page 2. And I see it talking about the wider interpretation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act as the policy of the United States to enforce such title against prohibited forms of discrimination rooted in anti-Semitism. Discrimination.
What is this defining anti-Semitism as, though? What is it defining it as?
That's a sidetrack. I don't want to get. Let's stay on this topic.
Sure,
which
no,
is,
I get you. I understand what you're saying, but we have to look at how the law, like, I'll read it word for word and I'll find it for you, right? But it takes me a minute to read. But like just off the jump, we know that it's good. Like we know how this is going to relate to Title IX. We just know, right?
Yeah,
we know how these things are going to be used, and we know that Title IX again has I'm pretty sure it's Title IX, which race gender, etc. Right? We know how that's going to be used, and I think that it's fair to say, hey, lawsuits are going to come from this, especially after the campus protests. Especially after the campus protests, right? There are going to be lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit that is going to be used to pressure these institutions who didn't take strong enough quote unquote action. And my worry is that in response to that, because these universities run on money, in response to that incentive, they are going to crack down. We already have a free speech problem in our academics.
I agree.
We already do.
I agree.
And this is going to exacerbate that by encouraging these institutions to crack down on speech that they will find anti-Semitic or might find anti-Semitic. And I think that's going to be worse for the students. I think it's going to be worse for their education. And I think it's just going to be worse for the country as a whole. But let me find you that specific
Hold on. I think I found it. Okay, this is top of page 3. It is critical to A, increase awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism, including its threat to America. I think that's 100% fair. Awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism. B, improve safety and security of Jewish students. I would hope everyone on this panel agrees everyone in America deserves to feel safe and secure while getting an education. C, reverse the normalization of anti-Semitism and counter anti-Semitic discrimination, discrimination being the key word there. D, expand communication and collaboration between communities. Like you can't sue based on an intent that's not in the law. Everything there sounds like it's trying to access people's ability to go to higher education, and it looks like it's trying to make sure we can have a wider conversation.
But then it defines anti-Semitism, and that definition, right, is the problem. But counterpoints is here, so I can put my moderator hat back on.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead, ask me the question. Counterpoints, hello.
So, with these concerns,
what up?
What's up, my guy? With these concerns, there's a really important thing I want to bring to your attention. Is this is actually this exact text and this rule has been active since 2019, and it doesn't seem like any of these repercussions or these consequences have happened.
But this definition has not, which is the issue.
As an executive order.
Oh, from Trump?
Yes.
Are we talking about the Trump executive order? I think that this has weight that I don't have the executive order up in front of me right now, so I can't.
It's actually verbatim, pretty much the same text. I could put it in.
Can you link it to me so I can make sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, please do. But in the meantime,
can you hear me okay?
There we go.
Counterpoint. Feel free to jump in. We are deep in the weeds of discussing the anti-Semitism bill. While I look at our friend Dami's Trump executive order, and I would oppose this if it is the exact same wording. I would say it's probably a bad idea as well, right? But again, I don't know when it's been implemented, how it's been implemented. I just don't. But counterpoints, what are your thoughts on the anti-Semitism bill? Let's get your opening statement. I know it's a little late in the game, but we're going to give you the intro, and then we'll continue discussion. Please link that to me. Thank you.
Yes.
Sure. Hi, my name is Connor. I'm a centrist nerd. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints 40K. We do lots of fun stuff. In reference to the anti-Semitism bill, I think the main thing that I saw that was annoying or alarming to me was specifically the definition of anti-Semitism, including Zionism. So for instance, I consider the definition of Semite to be somebody of Semitic ethnic descent, right? So you can be a Jew who doesn't support the nation state of Israel. Does that make you an anti-Semite? And then if we were going to extend this kind of protection, which I'm assuming is largely private, I don't think you can make public legal consequences for Americans for believing certain things about nation states. But you can still talk about consequences for if you participate in protests against the nation state of Israel at colleges and all that kind of stuff. Can you suffer some kind of administrative penalty for being an anti-Semite, which is what we're seeing on college campuses right now? And that to me would be alarming, basically because it's are we going to extend this protection to everybody else? Are we going to extend it to like Europeans? Are we going to extend it to French people? Are we going to extend it to English people? Are we going to say that British people have a inalienable and unique right to the British Isles? And if you talk about, British people the state of Britain shouldn't exist, then you're an Anglophobe. I don't think that we would apply this in any other circumstance. So it seems like we're carving out a privilege. Whereas I think in a liberal or libertarian society, we should all, relatively speaking, have the same rights.
Okay, so just before we go on, right? Gang, I allow free speech in my chat, right? But y'all are pushing it, so be careful. I just looked at that. But second of all, to this executive order, I think the wording here is important. In the executive order which you linked me, it says that the definition of the IHRA should be considered, and I think that's fair. But I think that the bill itself is solidifying that definition in a way I don't know if the executive order does. Just wording, and I know this feels like a legalese argument here, but I
actually like
thing.
I like the legalese argument.
Yeah.
So like with that definition though, if we really want to get into the nitty gritty, may is a big word in that definition. The word may, if we're talking about like how we get granular with each word that we're talking about or that's in the bill, these things that we're talking about as concerns, everyone that's been mentioned so far that I've seen, may is the operative word in the
bill that I have up, the bill that just passed the House, in the definitions section. Maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see may at all.
Well, that's actually the one problem I do have with the bill is they outsourced the definition. I'm talking about the IHRA, on where they define it. The problematic stuff.
If we accepted your framing though, let's say that it said like you may consider this anti-Semitism if people spoke out against the right of the state of Israel to exist. Then at that point, you're making it legislatively flexible for each institution, where a bunch of institutions might decide, well, no, you're protesting the nation state of Israel and its government, therefore you're not being anti-Semitic. But let's say that there was a more conservative pro-Zionist institution, and then they were like, oh yeah, you're absolutely being anti-Semitic. And it's because you gave them the flexibility with the word may.
Well, we kind of do need flexibility in something like this. For example, imagine a student was denied that happened to be African American, denied to go to the school. Without the flexibility of may, it would just be assumed every time a black student was denied that they were denied on the grounds that they were black. So it would be a variable in the consideration of if something is anti-Semitic or racist. This is kind of a specific to each situation issue.
Well, okay, so then let's boil down. So let's get into the nitty gritty then. So you're saying that flexibility is necessary because you're going to have people of good faith who are making interpretations that are going to be charitable to everyone and is in line with their responsibilities. I think we can show that when people are in power, they, not all the time, but if there is a gray area that's ripe for abuse, they will abuse it at some point. So let's talk about, like, I guess the concept of anti-Semitism. So is it anti-Semitic to not believe in the nation state of Israel's right to exist? Now, I personally believe that Israel has the right to exist. I look at the history. I look at the story of Zionism. I look at the history of the Jewish people. I think that it does. But there's plenty of people who are also as well historically studied as I am, and they don't. So are they anti-Semitic?
This is the problem, Connor, because we had this conversation before you came in, and we all agreed, like, that's garbage. There's no one on this panel that doesn't agree with you. It's a bad.
But that's the only part of the bill that anyone disagrees with, is that becomes what anti-Semitism is, which is why when I asked, I was like, well, the bill isn't defining anti-Semitism. The IHRA website is defining anti-Semitism. So then, like, yeah, that just becomes anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and that's bullshit. You can't have that.
Well, that may be why, that may be why the most important word in the definition and in the contemporary examples is may.
It shouldn't be at all.
Well,
yeah. So
it should only be if I'm attacking, or if someone's being attacked for Judaism, for being Jewish, for being of that ilk. It should not be. I don't like that country. Now all of a sudden that might be anti-Semitic because I don't like that country.
That's a requirement to meet that may. So you have to have the original definition, the definition that is stated, and these are examples of when this is happening, how this can be anti-Semitic. So if
But
you
but
are, oh, go ahead.
go on. No, go ahead. Continue. I was cutting you
So
off, so continue.
if you are, I'm sorry, I don't have this up, but it is. If you are, can somebody read the definition quick? Oh, here it is.
I don't know what you're referring to, buddy. So you're gonna have to be specific.
Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish and non-Jewish individuals and or their property and Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So that is a requirement to be met before the maze can be considered.
Okay, so if I'm hearing what you're saying that there has to be a behavior that initiates the investigation, which is the fact that they directed some harassing speech, some vandalism, some whatever towards either people who are Jews or non-Jews, or specific like physical institutions that are Jewish or whatever.
Yeah.
Did I hear that correct? So that would be the initiator for the investigation. So
Well,
where does the Zionism part come up?
Well, so if say you have somebody that wait, I'm getting autistic on this. I have to correct.
Hey,
The
calm down,
initiator
man.
for
Relax. It'll be okay. You can do it.
the initiator for the investigation would be a complaint lodged by an accuser or what would be a victim of this. And those would be what initiates the investigation. So
if you make an anti-Zionist remark, you can be then investigated because someone complained because they felt that it was anti-Semitic, and now you're under investigation for your anti-Zionist remark until it's found out that it's not anti-Semitic.
That's
I
always
would
kind
say
of true though, because I could do a complaint against you right now and be like, oh, Ali, trespassed on my property, last week or whatever, and then that would launch an investigation where like the cops would find out whether or not you were actually on my property in my state, whatever. So, but I do think that that can be weaponized to have a chilling effect, and I think that's part of what people are resentful of, even the introduction of this bill, is the fact that it seems intended to have a chilling effect. Now, the truth is, we might need a chilling effect at this specific moment in time, but that doesn't mean that we should overcorrect through legislation.
I think there's a
Well,
real.
hold on, we're gonna pass it to Wu.
Section 6?
Wu, go ahead.
Sorry.
I just think, like, respectfully, like, Connor, you're a really, really close friend, but at the same time, I feel like there's this tendency to just think that all of these problems are solved, and they're not. I mean, we have, even in recent years, and the Me Too era brought forward a lot of specific examples about how colleges were failing to investigate sexual assault and rape claims, right? My own home state of Mississippi still to this day has a lot of issues with Black people accessing education. This is why it was so, one of the legacies of the Trump administration is to take away the laws that were passed during integration to kind of do judicial oversight and make sure there's a watchdog process. There was a real tendency to just go, yep, mission accomplished, racism and sexism is solved for. I think all of us agree, and it's in the bill itself, that nothing in the bill can overwrite the First Amendment. You've got your First Amendment practice. I feel very strongly an honest reading of this. It is genuinely about access to public education. If my tax dollars are going to fund something, like I have no interest in like a private Christian school if they want to have their own policies that are hostile to women or, other groups, to a certain extent, like that's their, like it's a private school, they can set their own things. But when federal dollars are involved, I do think there's a really, really strong incentive for public education to make sure the public can access that institution. And I get the sense it's not a priority for y'all.
And this is
Can they not
question,
access the
if I may, just real
institution?
quick.
Are Jews not allowed to go to college?
Well, I'm gonna get to that. Ollie, I'll pass the ball to you exactly after I speak. Okay, we're good. Cool.
Sorry, yeah.
So no, don't apologize. You're fine. I'm interrupting you, so I should be apologizing. But here's the thing, and this is the crux of it. This is a disagreement, gang. This is the question. Does anti-Semitic remarks or as defined in this bill, does it quantify or does it qualify as preventing access to Jewish students? That's the question. Because there are racists in a place that are saying racist things, does that qualify as preventing access to black students? I don't know if it does, and that's the question. So go ahead, Ollie. I'm going to pass the ball to Ollie first. I interrupted him, and then we're going to continue on. And I just wanted to really point that bit of home because that seems to be where we're missing each other. So go ahead,
Yeah,
Ollie.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've heard you say, Brianna, you were talking that anti-Semitism was on the rise before October the 7th. And from what I understand, I don't think it's any of the institutions that are being anti-Semitic. It's typically just like civilians or people, right? Just like civilians are people that are racist or transphobic or sexist or whatever it may be, right? Like these people just exist. And so like, I don't understand where these people are like not allowed to go access it, have no access to institutions. I don't see that happening.
So
can
to
I-
be clear, my point was hate crimes, hate crimes, hate crimes, hate crimes. Like actual
okay.
hate crimes were higher before October 7th than
Yes.
any measured point in history. And we know from the studies that have come out after October 7th that those numbers are only on the rise. So I think that hate crimes are an equal access issue. Wick, to come back to your point, I don't think, like, I'm sure that if we really dived into this, I am not a lawyer that looks into civil rights law with education, though I do have a meeting with someone who is an expert on this on Monday. I'm sure if we looked at this, there's going to be a very practical definition between a student having a belief, a student sharing it with friends, a student writing a paper about it, a student telling a joke, and a student targeting another student with that. The example of the student acting like a monkey and getting up in the face of a black woman at a protest, that's a really good example. That's threatening. That says you're not safe here. That is intimidating her right to free speech and her right to feel safe on campus. So does that make sense to you? I think we all here agree that open expression that should be highly encouraged on college campuses. I think we would all agree we are falling short on that. But I think that there's, if you have a definition that goes to an access point of view, I think the federal government has a role to do that.
Well, hold on. So I wanna be specific then. So let's use the young man doing the
Monkey,
gorilla
yeah.
faces at a young black woman at Ole Miss.
Sure.
So in that situation, how would Title VI affect it? Would that student be required to be individually sanctioned by the school where he faces suspension or expulsion for behaving that way? Would the school potentially face defunding from the federal government if they failed to administrate or punish that? Is that the expectation?
So, as far as that student himself, as I understand it, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, the issue at play is that he's going to be suspended. But let me give you another example from the school. There's a statue of James Meredith, the person that tried to enroll in Ole Miss that caused that race riot, that's behind the library, which is where that video is taken. That statue has been repeatedly vandalized with Nazi symbols and a whole bunch of racial slurs on it. Those students, when you find out who did it, it's always the same frat boys from the same house, they are invariably kicked out of school because that does create a situation when you're defacing civil rights statues with slurs. That does create an environment that is understandably very hostile to black students. So that's an example. Would you disagree that's appropriate for the federal government, for the university to have policies to address that? Because not having policies to address that is an example of what would cause a university to lose funding here.
Before you answer, I did promise at the top of the hour I would read these super chats. So I will do so, and then we will allow counterpoints to respond to that directly. Cool? Cool. Here we go. 2024, A Gay Odyssey. for $2 says be fed money to unis is for med and STEM. Give that up. That's what he wrote.
Okay.
Thank you for the $2. $2 from the Empowered Man. Holy cow, WhickTV is on point tonight. Thank you for the $2. $2 more from the Empowered Man. 𝕵𝖎𝖎 Wu is dishonest and has an agenda. Thank you for the $2. $2 from 2024 Gay Odyssey. Top of hour. F listening to 𝕵𝖎𝖎 Wu that long. Thank you for the $2. $5 for the Black Metal
Rude.
followers. 6. What do you think of the Harvard University President 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝑔𝖜, the University of Pennsylvania President 𝕾𝍬𝖎 testifying in the Congress? Which time? I'm curious. They've done it a few times. And then 2024 Gay Odyssey. $2 more. Wick, you handsome devil. Those bears would love you. Thank you for the $2. Okay. Respond.
Okay, so responding to so I think we need to differentiate and we need to bear down on what Title VI is, because I just read Title VI cursory before this debate, and it looks like institutions that are receiving federal funds are not like allowed to do any kind of behavior that would promote discrimination, and as a result, if they are found to be promoting discrimination, then they can be defunded through federal subsidy. The federal government can stop paying their bills, right? So when we're talking about this situation where you have an individual student who's taking an action, the institution is not endorsing that behavior, right? So that person is going to suffer a criminal or social sanction. And what could be argued long term is that if the institution tolerated that behavior, so for instance, you're talking about the statue getting vandalized over and over again. Let's say campus police were ordered by the institution not to investigate it. Then obviously at that point, the institution is taking a side, and they're taking the side of people who are intimidating other people from a certain demographic from partaking in the public education system.
That's
so
right.
I understand there. However, what I'm kind of pointing at is, so far I see a lot of rowdy, aggressive, rhetorically disgusting students, and I've seen some faculty who have endorsed that stuff, but I don't think I've seen a single institution endorse like anti-Zionist perspectives.
Yeah, before you respond, and I'm going to let you respond directly to that, 𝕵𝖎𝖎. $20 from Lawson Harrison, and I think this is the reason I'm interjecting, because I think this is, again, cuts to the crux. He says this: we should keep in mind that a student has the right to be safe, not necessarily feel safe. And thank you for the $20. 𝕵𝖎𝖎, go ahead.
So I think that's really well said, Wick. Connor, I agree with that. And, this is what's actually in the bill itself as we've read it. I think it meets exactly the definition that you're talking about, where if the institution itself is not taking that safety seriously, that's what's in the bill. So it's not talking about like feelings or anything like that. It's talking about the actual state of that.
Well, hold on. So are you saying that from your perspective, the bill would, like, the institution would have to be so negligent that they effectively created a unsafe location for Jewish students, and as a result of that negligence, then they're potentially facing sanction from the federal government?
Here's the way it specifically says it in the bill. It's very short. Sorry to interject. Improve safety and security for Jewish communities. That's all it says.
That's very vague.
It's a very short bill.
Well, yeah, but so as an example, like we've had, just thinking of some of the videos that we've all seen over the past several weeks, which, by the way, I find gross. But we've had Jewish students who were going to class. We've had other students in keffiyehs with row guard vests, the bright yellow vests, and the keffiyeh headdress, get in their way and then basically block their access to an individual building. Now, at that point, I think that we're not going to send in the police because you're doing a disruptive protest. We're sending in the police because you're actually blocking public access to a public institution. Therefore, you're technically like, I don't want to say like detention, like false detention is too extreme. But at the same time, you're like denying the right of people to free travel or whatever. So at that point, we're sending in the cops there, not specifically because you're Jewish. And then here's the other thing too. Like, I wonder if this is going to build like a cultural enticement where why wouldn't I look at all the wild shit that like social studies programs have said about white people for the past decade and be like, I feel unsafe on public universities. I feel like they're making an unsafe space for white people. I think the universities and specifically these programs should be defunded because they're openly talking about how evil white people are. Like, why don't I just take this sword that is being given to Jewish folk, and why don't I just grab it myself and start slashing at public institutions? In this way, you might win me over.
Okay,
So
so
do
2
it.
points on this. I
White
agree
rights.
with you, Connor. I
Once
strongly
once
agree
you
with
go,
you.
Woo, we're gonna give it to Dami, and then I want Ollie to get in. So finish. and
Very
then-
super
yeah.
quickly. So first of all, I really strong. See, now I forgot my point. Yeah, I agree with your point there. I forgot what the. Okay, let me say my second point because I got this in front of me. This is the actual way it's defined here, and I think this really gets to something you said too, Wick. So listen to this very carefully. In reviewing, investigating, or deciding whether there's been a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, blah, 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 blah. The Department of Education shall take into consideration the definition of anti-Semitism as part of the department's assessment of whether the practice was motivated by anti-Semitic intent. So let's go to that statue of James Meredith examples. Let's say some frat boys are out there and they're just drunk as hell because they're trying to come back from the library and they're walking past the statue on the way to frat row, right? If they're out there and they're just spray painting everything in sight, you know, like that would not meet this definition. If they're out there and they've got a history of making racist statements, it's clear they've like have a real problem with black people being at Ole Miss and they're painting those slurs on the statue, that would be something that would meet the standard in the bill here. All of this sounds very reasonable. And again, it is a part, it is being assessed. It is just something they have to take into consideration. That's the actual text of the bill. So why do you have a problem with just a working definition of anti-Semitism being part of how they evaluate this?
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Do you think that if this bill is codified as is, right, as written, goes through
Which
the
we agree
Senate,
it shouldn't be.
yeah, sure, but it's what we have to work with. I can't work with something that doesn't exist, right? So what we
Fair.
have to work with goes through the Senate, gets passed, and implemented by these institutions. Do you think that a person who is critical of Israel, who wants to hold a protest on their campus, do you think that they're going to be maybe given pause and wonder, hey, can I actually protest this, or am I going to get in trouble with the academic institutions for to do that? And I think that question really hits to my main criticisms of bills like this, is it creates a chilling effect. But go ahead.
No, I think that's a fair statement, Wick. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm a lot more pro free speech today than in the Gamergate era is not because my ideals have changed, it's because I've seen the backlash to measures that I thought were eminently reasonable about, increasing these definitions and creating enforcement. I think very few people would look at Twitter today and conclude it's a safer space for trans people than 5 years ago. I think part of the backlash is it's made it worse. So I think that's well said. I think there can be a fear there.
So
yeah, but go ahead, Dami, and then Ollie, and then we'll get back to it. Sorry, I'm still
I forgot
in
one of my
panelist
points.
mode, so
But the other one is, I think a good way to think about this is like, the first point was the actual. Oh, it's not. None of this has anything to do with police. Worst case scenario, this isn't a criminal matter. So when we were talking about calling the police on the people blocking the Jewish students from getting to the library, that actually they could use that to add to the information when they make that decision. But at the end of the day, this isn't a criminal matter that we're talking about. Another thing is this: the way I like the way that I see it is, it's kind of like a hate crime sentence enhancement, where you can say stuff. You have the freedom to say stuff, whatever you want. You could say the worst things in the world that would be considered racist or are racist. But if you do that in the commission of a crime, and you're found guilty of that crime, they're going to tack on something for the hate element. And then the other part is the execution part has been well established before the anti-Semitism bill. And this argument could be had for any race or any group of people that has been covered under the Title IX.
Okay, I'll just interject right here. I think that the pointing to, oh, these things already exist for campuses, they're already implemented on campuses, that doesn't compel me, because I think the state of our campuses is dog shit, right? I think the state of free speech on our campuses is dog shit. I think the academic, the institutional capture and ideological capture is dog shit, and I think that these laws, even if you were saying that this isn't going to be any different than colleges are now, yeah, that doesn't compel me to want to vote for this, right? Like, it doesn't compel me to want to support this. But I want to pass it to Ali, because Ali, I should say. I promised I would. Go ahead, Ali.
Oh, I mean, I just think, Muslims, Arabs, I think Islamophobia is a broad term, and Palestinians need their own term, right? We can't use Semite. So, I mean, what if Arabs and Muslims used this, had an anti-Islamophobia bill, anytime a school was, was Zionist, was pro-Israel, was funded to Israel, that makes me feel, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, we're a smaller population in this country. We're half the population of Jewish people. I feel like Islamophobia is a pretty large fucking deal. I feel like all these schools that, they're invested in Israel and they're getting money from Israel and support from. So I mean, like, yeah, fuck it. If this is how, because this is how all it's gonna end up being is, I feel bad because this is happening. Cool. Now the school is going to get mad lawsuits. I think an Islamophobia bill should be passed. I think you work in the countries, you work in the word terrorist in there too, right? And I don't think you guys would be agreeant to that. I think you'd be opposed to that.
I have a question for you, though.
Go ahead, ask your question.
You're not down, Connor?
No, hold on. You go first, but I got a rebuttal.
Let Dami ask his question. Go ahead.
Why? So first, Israel is our ally, right? That's our government, and our government's, let's call it, friend.
So?
Why? How? Can you make it make sense to me that we would have our government compelled to call funding towards our ally, which is their friend, an act of discrimination?
Because there are Muslim citizens in this, because there are 3 million Muslims and Arab citizens in this country, probably more, who could agree that it's kind of discriminatory, makes us feel unsafe, that our government is sitting here funding the genocide of our people and the elimination of our people and the destruction of our countries and so on and so forth. That could just really...
what if your ally is doing something really fucked up and you're not allowed to criticize it, or there's a chilling effect against criticism?
It's not a matter
and Israel, and I want to say fuck Israel, and I want to say all these things, and if I think my school is invested in Israel, who is they took money from me, quite literally have bombed a house of mine. So if I want to be like, well, I don't feel safe at the institution because the institution is supporting this regime that I feel blah 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 blah.
That's why you're
now there we go. You're Islamophobic.
Though.
I mean, so then
right. So hold on. So what would happen? Let's say that we made this for everybody, right? We made this standard for everybody. Then what Ali and the Muslims could do is they could say, hey, listen, we think that the organizations being tied in with the Zionists and the military-industrial complex and all that kind of stuff, this makes me feel unsafe on campus. Therefore, I am not being protected actively in a place of public education. As a matter of fact, if anything, they're cheering on Zionism, which is butchering tens of thousands of people who look just like me. Therefore, the institution is not protecting me enough from the Zionists. Therefore, you need to defund my public education system. Now, I'm not saying that's actually going to pass, but what you're doing is you're creating this vector through which people can use their geopolitical grievances to try to screw over public institutions. And the truth is, we shouldn't have any of this, because I'm kind of like, I'm joking a little bit, but I would, oh my God, do you know how much I would love it if we applied this across the board and there was like some anti-white bill that got passed, and whenever some freak gender studies professor like came out and was like, whites are the fucking devil and they are responsible for all the evils in the world, and colonialism is this and colonialism is that, and then I could just go, hey, so I went to the University of Central Florida. Hey, UCF, I'm suing you and I want tens of thousands of dollars, and I want the federal government to defund you for allowing this gender studies lady to pop off at the fucking mouth. And by the way, she's tenured, so you can't immediately fire her. So you as an institution are stuck between your requirements to maintain tenured professors, my safety needs as a student, and your obligations under Title VI. And by the way, all this is going to do is it's going to become weaponized by tribalized ethnic groups in order to use their geopolitical grievances to sway public institutions in their direction. When the truth is, these
why
public
has that not
institutions should be
happened?
as neutral as possible. Oh, I would say it has happened.
In what example? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, yeah, I have to put up with women and blacks and Muslims, and I have to put up with all these fucking people
Oh,
being
so
mad annoying.
it works
It-
as
yeah,
intended is the
Yeah,
is the
80 years
consequence
ago, it
you're
was all
against.
white men. It would have been great for my tribe to just keep running things, but no, I have to deal with all you people now. So, all right, I'm kind of fucking joking, but at the same time,
Kind
like,
of.
no, I am joking because, you know, I got a wife. She's a woman. I like her, I guess. So the point is that, like,
I'm gonna tell her you said that. I'm gonna
I
text her
know
as soon as I get off the phone.
she'll fucking hit me in a bit.
Yeah.
So, like, no, but I'm joking, but I'm trying to make a point that, like, we have seen these things swayed by political influence and through identity politics legislation. So you're
But I mean,
expanding.
Connor, I think that gets to something I think that we would agree on, like a practice at MIT that they just stopped. Yeah, I'm sorry that my voice is giving out, but a practice that they just stopped at MIT was requiring every single new hire that was doing an application to basically do a diversity statement. So, as part of like applying to be a professor at the university, you had to write like a really long statement about your commitment to diversity. You include stories about how it did it. And I think we would all say, like, I'm glad that's going away. It's very easy for me to imagine how that would really limit the number of people that got through a process and really kind of advantage certain kind of attitudes they're going through. I think for your kind of humorous example that you're talking about with that gender studies professor that's so over the top, I actually do think that if it's getting to the point that she's making, you know, cis white male students feel uncomfortable to the point that's impacting their education or not making them feel safe at school, I actually do think that the institution has a responsibility to step in and do something. That is also an equal access to me.
How do you guarantee? So for instance, we're talking about power right now, and we're talking about power in institutions and how it's wielded.
Sure.
So from a liberal or libertarian perspective, when you say like, well, nobody should have this power because it's going to be weaponized against different groups, right? I don't think that you could guarantee me that there wouldn't be another progressive wave in a decade or 2 decades that would still use the racism is power plus prejudice definition, and as a result, use that as a formula through which they can marginalize white people as a demographic plurality and people who are disproportionately wealthy, and also Jews as well, who are honorary whites and who are represented at the upper ends of society to different degrees. So like that's the thing, is like when we wield this weapon, we have to assume that it will be used in the worst way possible. And I am saying it's like a nuke. So I'm saying that it's better if none of us have nukes versus all of us have nukes. And if all of us are going to have nukes, then we all need to have them.
But
Right. So you're talking about repealing Title IX ultimately. I can't get, or the 1964
No.
Civil
We
Rights
can
Act.
leave
Yeah.
Title IX. I would just say that like Jews don't get like an exception. They get laws that apply to everybody just as equally. So it would apply to black people, or it would apply to women, or it would apply to Asians, or it would apply to whatever. You read the law and it's literally formulated in such a way that it protects every kind of person.
Well, this is what this is trying to be passed for. It's because they see that there seems to be a loophole where Jew is covering multiple different categories, and sometimes it's oh, I'm not the Israel example. So like I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist.
Yeah.
That can be used.
Okay.
What's
Sure.
wrong? What's wrong with that statement? I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm
no.
anti-Zionist. What's the issue?
In a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Right? And
So
that's
not in a vacuum. What's wrong with that? Let's
Yeah, like,
add in
what's wrong
some
with it in
flavor for
general?
us.
all right. So if you combine it with actual acts or a culture,
Like
I
what?
mean not
Hold
a
on.
culture,
What are actual acts?
Like an actual acts, like
but, here's a
protesting
perfect
Israel.
example. Oh, well, protest. Here's another one of protesting Israel, creating an unsafe environment for Jews, and that would be that example where there were the protesters denying the access to the library of the Jew. That what is problematic and would be probably covered in this.
But not
But
because
I'm
they're
sure BLM
protesting.
made whites
Hold
feel
on.
unsafe. Do they not have the right to protest?
It's not because of the
well, you have the right to protest. The problem didn't come from the protest. The problem came from you denying a Jewish person rights. Well,
What was the rights that were denied to the Jewish people to not be able to walk on the public
Getting to their
quad?
class.
yeah. The second you're blocking,
Well, the blocking with those
public.
students, but I think they were
Right?
still able to go to classes, go around the blockade.
Well, that's what they say, but I mean, I personally don't believe
They could use another water fountain.
Well,
It's
I
okay,
mean,
right?
Were you there?
Yeah,
Do you know
exactly,
anybody?
exactly. They could use another water fountain. They could they're entitled to that. And the second that you're stepping on their right to be there and their right to any of their rights, your rights are out the window. That's you're not validly asserting your rights by denying another person their rights.
Okay, listen, I'm tracking, and I'm tracking how in a good faith way this could be applied. I guess my anxiety or my distaste for this bill stems from what I feel like are real world examples of the sword cutting in only one direction. And so for instance, like and actually this was like a real thought experiment for me that tested my principles. There was a Muslim lady in Australia, and she got hit with a anti-Semitism sanction from her school, and she ended up being acquitted from it. But the reason why she was under that civil sanction in the first place was because she celebrated the murder of 2 Jews in Israel. Now, they were settlers or whatever, but one of the people who was murdered was 6 years old. And she called the murderer a hero. Now,
Wait.
on one hand, that's disgusting. Okay, it's disgusting speech, right? But
What did you say the outcome was? I'm sorry.
the outcome was it was actually dismissed. It was
Oh,
acquitted.
okay. So,
But the reason why it was acquitted was because I'm sure she went with her settler, colonial, occupying land, historical grievance, whatever fucking justification. And here's the thing. But I don't think that you should have to go to a court for that shit in the first place. Because here's the thing. You know what? Looking back on it and making it a one-to-one metaphor, I think I said some wild shit about the Middle East and North Africa. I think I've said some wild shit about Arabs and Muslims. And I've said some wild shit specifically about people who lived in cities that tolerated ISIS as their governing faction. And so if I say, sorry, real quick, just as an example, let's say that Ali and I are going to school. We're talking about politics because we're young people. And then I say, hey, listen, ISIS is fucked up. I'm so ecstatic that the United States of America bombed the shit out of those regions. And as a matter of fact, I think those people who are local to them, the civilians, I think they're sympathetic to ISIS. Otherwise, why would they have tolerated them being in power in the first place? As a result, I think we should have just nuked that entire fucking area. And then Ali goes to the fucking board and he says, listen, I don't feel comfortable. I got this dude who's basically cheering on the deaths of my cousins. I don't feel safe in this school anymore. And then I have to go to a board in order to justify a geopolitical conversation. That's fucking crazy. That's like un-American.
So, well, I mean, it's very American. It's like if the police were to kick in my door
It's
right now.
American for me to have to go to a board.
Yeah, it is. That's the due process that we get as a right. Imagine the police kick my
I'm listening, but that's crazy.
Let him finish. Let him finish. Maybe he'll elaborate. Go ahead.
Imagine the police kicking my door right now, and they saw somebody rob a bank that looked just like me, and they are sure that I did it, but I know I didn't do it. Well, I have my due process. That doesn't mean that the law against robbery is wrong because I had to go to court and get acquitted. That's the law working. It's my due process working for me.
I disagree with you very strongly, and the reason why I think we can point exactly into your example. when people have warrants or swattings or whatever committed against their house, there is a real risk of death or injury by arms of the state. And so, for instance, let's say that you're the robber that looks like the robber, right? But you're not the robber. You own a legal gun. You come to your doorway with your gun because it's 4 a.m. and they're doing a no-knock morning raid because they know that you got a gun. And then you open up your own door and you get blasted. This just happened to an Air Force veteran like yesterday or the day before. They just released the shit. So acting like, yeah, we should just set this up because there's going to be a court case that's going to adjudicate it and do the due process on the back end. One, you're wasting court resources. Two, you're misapplying the ideals of due process. Like, you shouldn't be in that situation in the fucking first place.
You're missing
whenever possible.
I'm saying the main point of what I'm saying is, if they were to do that, that doesn't mean, oh, it doesn't work, we should make robbery legal.
Okay,
That
should
would
I
be the
be able
analogy.
to talk shit about the Middle East and North Africa? And should I be able to talk shit about Muslims and Arabs?
Yes, and Jews.
Okay, if I talk too much shit while I'm at a college,
One moment,
should
I
be
have to
called
handle
in front
something.
of an
I'm
academic
sorry.
board?
I'm sorry, I have to handle something. You don't get to just aspirate the slur that you use and call someone a slur. Hold on, give me one moment.
What's
Wait, did I do
aspirate?
something?
Oh, so just no, you're fine. Sorry, my bad. Someone in chat is being annoying, and they just broke rule
Like
0.
Connor said Arabs on accident.
No,
So
Arabs isn't a
There.
slur.
Okay.
I
carry
thought you
on.
said I thought you said Arabs. That's when it becomes a slur.
It might. I was about to say
Arabs.
the
You want
way
to
I
add it? You want
no.
to add
the
it to
way
the
I say
repertoire?
it, the way I say it, it might
Aspirate
sound
is
like
when
a
you put
slur,
like
but that
asterisks
doesn't
and
mean.
stuff. But anyway.
Okay, got you. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The way I say it might sound like a slur, but it's not actually a slur.
So
Not yet.
This is explicitly this bill explicitly protects our ability and right to be racist, to be anti-Semitic, to be any of that.
But
Hold up.
Section
But if
6
you're racist for
lays-
too long and the institution is viewed as
Yeah.
enabling your racism, then eventually they get defunded.
well, if you're creating an environment which
Uh-huh.
would probably require other actions and application
Uh-huh.
of that racism with action, yeah, that, but it wouldn't be the speech that is creating that environment. It would be something else. For example, like you're denying a Jewish person their rights because you're doing a protest, and they're specifically, even if they're making a point, like, oh, trying to walk through to get their nice video.
But that
doesn't-
exists for all students. That shouldn't just exist for
about to say-
Jewish students. It exists for if I saw a black
Well,
student,
so-
an Arab student, a white
And
student.
doesn't this
it
apply to
is-
MAGA? Doesn't this
It's just
absolutely
harassment.
well, and doesn't this absolutely apply to Make America Great Again? Particularly the people in the red ball caps who go there and talk about deporting all the Mexicans and all that kind of bullshit. Because basically, like, you're talking about 25% of the voting population of the United States now believes in no more Muslims, secure the border, deport all illegal immigrants, trans people aren't real, gay people have been duped by Satan into smoking cock. Like, they believe that shit. I said it as hyperbolically as I could. So they believe that shit.
No, I think that's what's going on, actually. I like that.
So-
I
so
like
big
that.
fervently. They believe that shit fervently. So if they show up to a protest with red hats on, how can you not complain as a minority group that those people are advocating against, that is making you feel unsafe in a public institution? And by permitting the protest in the first place, you're making it a unsafe environment for your specific minority group.
Well, so this is a really slippery slope idea, and it really boils down to freedom of speech is a negative right, and the right to the institutions to get funding from the government is a positive. It would be considered a positive application, right? So we don't actually, America, we don't really have positive rights like that. So we're not entitled, be it as a human or an institution, to the funding that we get. But just like if we were to buy a house, so there's rules like when you buy your house, you have to live in it for 2 years or something like that. If you're getting federal funding, that doesn't mean
Sure.
I can't go buy a house or start a school. I
But
could start a racist school if I want to. I just can't get
I
federal funding.
understand your procedural analysis, and I agree with it. Okay, I agree with you that just because you as a public institution exist does not mean that you are entitled to federal funds. I agree with that concept. But at the same time, I think that we live in the culture that we create. So if you are saying that free speech is a negative right for Americans, and it's, you know, it's guaranteed insofar as it can be, but then institutions have to follow the guidelines set up by the feds, then what the feds incentivize through like their funding says something about the American culture that we want to promote. And if there's a conflict in there where the federal government is saying, yeah, you got the right to freedom of speech, you got the right to freedom of conscience, you got the right to this, you got the right to that, but if you exercise those rights, we're going to punish you financially, that's a contradictory cultural state.
Well, again, it's not about just the speech. The speech is explicitly protected in this bill. This isn't.
You keep saying that.
It
You keep
cannot be used.
saying
Is
that
the language of the bill
to infringe on someone's free speech rights, but it's
Yeah.
not a free speech right, technically, if they posit it as you have made these people feel unsafe through your lack of ability to, because the student himself isn't being punished in this case, it's the institution that's being punished.
But that
Does that make sense?
That part of the bill is a limitation put on the institutions to that.
It is
that's
saying
kind
if
of,
you don't do this, we will take away your money.
but you also cannot do this in a way that it infringes on the rights. On the right to
with-
free speech. That's
But
that's more
this-
explicit than any other part.
You jump far enough my way that I end up agreeing with you. And so what I want to say, like I'll throw the olive branch your way. So I agree that Americans have the right to freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, and that basically means going down to the quad, raising up your signs, yelling a whole bunch, using megaphones, you know, eating food, you know, hanging out, whatever. But once you start doing that other stuff like vandalism, blocking other students from getting to their classes, et cetera, then at that point, I'm okay with law enforcement officers coming in and thumping you. Now, I'm a chud, right? Like, I'm a Republican. I love it when cops beat up people, right? So that's my stance, but I'm just saying, like, this is a sword that cuts in multiple directions.
Look, let me collect my thoughts a little bit. At the end of the day, right? And I see people in chat. I see tomfoolery in chat saying, "Oh, this has been in place since 2010." Yes, and ever since then, the free speech in campus has been under attack and gone down. Right? We can measure this. Attempts at deplatforming things.
Hold on, how can you
Based
attribute it to
tomfoolery, by
that
the way.
bill? How can you
I
attribute
think
it
that
to
there is
that?
there is at least a
definition?
correlation,
Because it
if
was an
not a
executive
causation.
order.
It's multifactorial. Like, come
It
on.
is,
Like,
but this is a
that's a poor
factor.
argument.
It is a factor, but regardless, I think this specific bill, again, just to reiterate, just for the new people coming in here, to reiterate my issues with this is, one, it ties it to an outside groups and institutions definition. That specific definition and the examples, which the bill references as using, are problematic in the sense that it does include criticisms of Israel as being anti-Semitic on at least 2 occasions. And the way that this is going to actually end up being implemented on a on-the-ground level is going to lead to a chilling effect of free speech, and it's going to be a problem. But I want to pass it to Wu, then I want to pass it to Ollie. I know you're both trying to get in. Wu, then Ollie. Go ahead.
I was just saying your argument there didn't feel strong to me. That's all I wanted to say.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Ollie,
so
go
I
ahead.
mean, in the list that it was trying to define anti-Semitism, it's also like symbols and images. So then, like, if from the river to the sea is recognized as anti-Semitic, and the 𝕾𝖍𝖎 is recognized as a symbol of that protest and representative of that statement, that is then that could also be like wearing the 𝕾𝖍𝖎 would be related to like wearing having a swastika type shit.
No,
Yeah,
just,
Is this
you're allowed to
that's
have
what
the
makes me
swastika.
feel unsafe. Yeah,
You're
like
allowed
I'm
the
joking,
swastika.
but I'm not. Like, see,
What?
this I would weaponize the fuck out of this shit. If we, let's say that
that's what I'm saying.
white
It's right here.
become-
Like, am I scaring you?
Yeah.
Connor?
I am scared. I am terrified
Like,
for my life. Like, if
wrap
you,
it around, it's like it becomes
Yeah.
a thing.
holy
No.
shit, dude,
I feel you.
put a sheet with a hole cut out for the neck area, and I will be fucking shitting my pants. So, but like, see, here's the thing. Like, we should be creating a culture in which we bump into each other and it's unpleasant, but we fucking deal with it because we're adults. And so as a result, I have an ugly conversation with my Arab Muslim friend. He tells me that I'm a fucking douchebag because I don't care about civilian casualties. We sit down, I have a beer, he has a tea because he's prohibited from having a beer, and then we hash our bullshit out. That's the kind of culture that we should create. Whereas what I think by excusing this bill, I think that you're going down an increasingly litigious society where I'm joking, but I've seen this shit go so far that I would just flip this shit on its head and make it for fucking white people. We'll probably be a minority in the next decade or whatever. I can come up with some specific anti-white bigotry grievance bullshit, and then I can encourage millions of young people in order to complain to their public institutions so we can like nip anti-white bigotry in the fucking butt. But that makes a lamer, weaker, dumber, more brittle, less connected society, and I'm doing it out of spite, not because I think it's good for the country.
But how
Right
come
now,
that hasn't been used?
Arabs and
Because-
Muslims have the easiest path to do that. And like, I know you're joking with the white, but like, I do think if this bill passes, Arabs and Muslims are going to end up getting together, trying to pass the similar type bill with the similar type of language. And for Islamophobia. And why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't you want to have this legal, like, granted, like, hey, I am scared. I feel uncomfortable. Do something about it, which is all they want anyways, right? And instead of protesting, let's go try to legislate and pass bills so that you can get the divestment that you've been asking for, right? I mean, that's all that's going to end up happening. To it, like to your case, no more protests. But now, anti-Semitism is being done legally. It's going to be done on, and as far as what you guys define as anti-Semitism, it's going to be done on a legal level. Hey, we're going to get divestment through claims of fear, through bill passing, and through there we go. Like, it's just...
And real quick, you won't even have to get all the way through. You won't have to get the feds to defund an institution. Just the threat of it is going to make institutions bend your way.
Yeah, I
want
to give Dami. You can respond. Then we got to pass it to Wu to respond as well. So go ahead.
The idea of this slippery slope that's gonna be used for white people or any other people. It's white has been included in this in Title 9 or 6. I can't read Roman numerals in this law since like 1972, if I'm not mistaken. It hasn't happened. Islam has been included in this for that long. It's not like this bill's older than me.
Well, yeah, but Islamophobia. Until Islamophobia is defined as being critical of these specific countries and these specific groups of people, and until it's then defined as that, then you're not going to have the same issues. But once you're able to have it be defined as criticism of other countries, that makes me feel unsafe, especially if it's pro-Israel. Once again, I'm Lebanese. They have bombed a house of mine that I owned. So for me, if you want to do this, if Islamophobia can then be, if you're critical of other countries, I can claim the unsafeness immediately.
Yes,
because of that. That's the only issue I have.
I've not talked in so long.
Go ahead,
Can I say something? You want to know how you get crazy SJW progressives? Do you want to know what made me a crazy SJW person in the Gamergate era?
What made you crazy, Will?
It's because you have reasonable fucking situations, and you don't give people a venue to get it dealt with, so they come to some really fucking radical conclusions. And Connor, you're my brother, you're my friend, you're my buddy, but what you're ultimately talking about here is fucking crazy town, man. You've got the 1964 civil rights legislation. If you made a list of like the top 5 most important things Congress has ever done that almost everyone would agree has been good for the country, the 1964 Civil Rights Act would be on that list. It gave access to college for women, would give access to black people, protected all kinds of different races, it's had a ton of secondary effects that have been really good for other marginalized groups like gay people. And you're talking about this fucking theoretical harm, and the conclusion you come to, it's like, let's blow the whole thing up because I got some political philosophy here. And it's like, I get it. I understand what you're talking about. I hear the theoretical harm that you're talking about here, but you're talking about like literally getting a cornerstone of jurisprudence in this country and just shredding it. and you have no plan to like replace it with a good piece of public policy.
No.
Like all these forces have not gone anywhere. This is how you get progressives. You go to the craziest like ideas possible, and it like makes us want to put all these systems in place. Yeah.
Let me tell you what radicalized me. Maybe we can come to we
Okay.
can come to a consensus here. So what radicalized me was I was born in the late 80s. So I
Sure.
was raised on Captain Planet and Power Rangers and all those fucking things. And what happened was we had the Yellow Ranger. She was Asian, right?
She
We
was
had
cute.
the
I loved her.
we had
What was her
the
name?
green
Yeah.
was
Black
the Green
Ranger.
Ranger. Was the Black Ranger black? Was the Green Ranger
Black Ranger was
I-
black. Red Ranger was like tan white Italian.
Kimberly.
Right.
Kimberly was the Pink Ranger.
The Pink Ranger
Pink
was
was
white
the
girl. The white and Green Ranger was the white guy who stole the white girl from the Italian guy. Just saying, a lot of subliminals in Power
So hold on.
Rangers.
Let me
You guys
expand
know
though,
way
because
too
I
much
did-
about Power Rangers, but go
Okay,
ahead.
I love
but
Power
the
Rangers.
concept behind G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, Captain Planet, and all that kind of stuff was that we were this cornucopia of races and ethnicities and languages and religions, but we were all working towards a shared goal. And then what happened, I would say, probably into adulthood, joining the military, going into law enforcement, going through college, all that kind of stuff, I realized like, oh shit, this is a myth that we told ourselves that we're all like peers working towards a shared goal. The world is actually a lot more complex, and there's tribes of people who have different interests, and they're actually fighting each other because some of these interests are contradictory. And so what's happened is I think that the power of American society and the American Republic is in liberalism with a capital L, in which you write universal language. So for instance, the reason why the First Amendment is awesome is because it doesn't differentiate between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. It basically grants the freedom of speech and freedom of religion to all people. When you're talking about the Second Amendment, same thing. The right to self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms, that is extended to all people. Due process, same thing. So when we're talking about the 1964 civil rights legislation, the reason why I would say it's positive despite its specificity is that we realize that we were not extending these negative rights or positive rights to everybody, and therefore we're creating an unjust society. But what I've seen over the past decade, I've seen a lot of people, especially on the far left, say that the myth of egalitarianism along liberal lines is just a myth to keep us all placated, and we're better off when we're in our tribal groups advocating just for our tribe. And if you look at people, I'm just going to call it out. If you look at people like Vosh, if you look at people like Demon Mama, if you look at people who are on the far left or whatever, they are unapologetic in this fact. They think the ends justify the means, and they don't give a fuck as long as they win. And so what's happened is the dissident right has taken the same attitude, and now we live in one of the most polarized political eras that I can ever fucking remember. And so as a result, I'm saying create universal bills. Do not write a single Jewish bill. Write a bill that applies to everyone and leave it at that.
I hear what you're saying, but now you want two different things. Because a minute ago, you were talking about shredding the 1964 Civil Rights Act, or at least talking
You put that in my mouth. I never
said
said that.
You were talking everything was bad about that, and then you started talking like the way that we can't adjudicate through this. So your goal now is to repeal the 1964 Civil Rights Act and write like a bigger mega law with like, bigger provisions? That doesn't seem very realistic, man.
It's not. I would leave the 1964 Civil Rights Act as is, and I'm pretty sure if I go check the language, it doesn't say Black Americans have been uniquely fucked over in history, therefore we're going to extend them all these rights. I'm pretty sure what it's going to say is all of these rights are going to be guaranteed to everybody, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, etc. It's not going to say Black Americans. It's going to say everybody.
Would you remove things like the Violence Against Women Act or
Sorry.
what
I just had the worst
He really-
fucking joke.
He
I had the
really
worst
wants to
joke
say
ever.
yes.
Hey,
you
look,
up, you up for that one?
I
I'm
was like, yes, I love hitting
nervous.
women. Like that
I don't
almost, like,
know what the
like,
joke is. I'm very
yeah.
nervous.
Oh boy.
That almost came out.
Um,
So, anyways,
would you go ahead.
oh no.
No,
So,
finish your. No, hold on, Dami. You haven't talked a lot. Finish your statement. Don't let counter bully you. Okay.
Or the Marriage Equality Act, or any other act that specifically names a group of people that is considered marginalized?
Okay. I am also a benevolent sexist, so I think that we have to treat women like retarded children, and so
God.
they might need.
Wait, what?
They might need.
What?
Yeah.
What?
They might need specific laws because they don't know how to
More
manage their
protections.
affairs. They don't know how to assert themselves. They don't know how to be aggressive or abrasive. They don't know how to
Oh my
hang.
God.
They don't know how to hang
I
with
know
men.
your wife. I think
Well,
she
wouldn't that be
knows how to
covered under the
be
Americans
assertive.
Why do you think?
Disability Act?
Why do you think I married her? I married her
His-
because I
His
would
wife is the
say this-
exception, not the rule.
I would say this wild shit, and then she would fucking smack me and start talking
Yeah.
shit about me, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but she's the exception. I know plenty of docile, stupid, retarded children, women. So, anyways, the point
I take
is
that.
like,
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate
well, but so for instance, like, okay, so I might have like a paternalistic view when it comes to women or whatever, but I don't think that we should. I don't think we should have a paternalistic view when it comes to Black folk or Jewish folk or whatever. I think that we should have like like they're people, right? They're human beings, so we should, relatively speaking, have an egalitarian framework.
So again, I'll just interject real quick, right? And we're coming to the end of this, right? We're gonna get to closing soon, but
Oh,
I'll
boy.
say this: like, you keep comparing this to like the Violence Against Women Act or to the Marriage Equality Act. In a lot of these cases, what these bills do is they are giving a group that has been denied a thing access to that thing. Like the Civil Rights Act, we had the school integrations happened alongside that, right? Because of that, they weren't allowed to deny access anymore. This bill that just passed the House is fundamentally different from that because Jewish people aren't being denied access to these institutions. When they are through the obstructions, the police come in and arrest everyone, right? Like they stop that.
And those should
but-
apply to everyone. So, for
Yeah,
instance,
but-
if
but-
let's say we, I
But-
do want to finish that idea, but I'll let you go.
But what the, God damn it, what the bill right now isn't doing, right? Or what it actually is doing is it's carving out exceptions of you can't say this. You can't
not,
say
though.
this. You can't
It's doing
have
exactly
these
the
beliefs.
opposite of that.
You can say it. You just might have to go in
It's-
front of a
Yeah,
panel of.
if you do, you'll have
Yeah,
to
you're gonna-
be you'll have to
officially
be
anti-Semitic.
regulated and investigated to see if
So-
you
So
if you
hold
did
on.
it.
I push
And
back
here's the
on that
thing:
for a second?
you could, yes, but I'll write down my idea.
So the idea that these are fundamentally different because there was a group of people that have been denied, that goes against the whole why would this why would this bill be pushed forward? The whole idea is,
You know why it's okay. Let's not mince words. You know why it's pushed forward. You had a very widely covered national college protests that
What's
got
the-
all sorts of news attention. So they drafted this bill real quick so that they
What's
could
the full name?
That's
signal
not true,
What's the
Wick.
full name of
That's
the bill?
not true.
the
the full
I feel like the
anti-Semitism
bill came out because it's
Islamophobic.
Islamophobic.
The full
Wait,
name of the
sure.
bill has a year in it.
We just don't like Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians, so the bill
Yeah.
got passed right now when everyone was writing. That's why TikTok's. I'm being so
No.
serious. I can take every
This-
one of these things and use them. That's why TikTok's being banned right now. Everyone's saying TikTok's being banned because all of the Palestinian support.
No,
all
no,
of the
no.
all
All right.
and that is what is being said. That is what is being said. I never said that's not. I agree. I said that is
They're
what's
saying
being
that
said. You
'cause
have
they're
to
fucking
accept.
Okay,
Some
one
things are
hey,
being
one at a
said.
time,
You
one at a
have
time, one
to
at a time, one at a time, one at a
accept
time.
that.
We're gonna let Ollie finish his statement, then you guys can respond. Go ahead,
That's-
Ollie.
You can turn these things around, holding the Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel every time someone relates Palestinians to Hamas.
Wait.
Like,
about
think it's
TikTok. Oh, you can read pieces in the New York Times. You can actually talk
Thank
to
you.
people writing the bills. You can actually
Yes.
learn a fucking
It's
thing or two
paywalled and
about.
we're all
Will you
broke.
stop
Appreciate
and
it.
let me finish what I'm
It's
saying?
pay-
I'm sorry if you're too poor to read the New York Times. You should find a way to do it anyway. Just here's a tip for you. Just type it into fucking Reddit, and the article will be there. Just get the headline, type it into Google. You'll find it. I believe in you. But you can find like all the truth about why they're doing this stuff. But you go to the stupidest, most fourth grader, brain dead
I never
conspiracy
said you
theory.
couldn't-
Shut up! I'm talking. I'm gonna finish.
Oh
You
my
to
God,
these
go off.
dumb conspiracy theories. Oh, they're banning
Yes.
TikTok because of they hate Palestinians.
Well, he was
No, it's
using that as
because
a
of
counterexample.
China.
I-
Will you shut the
Okay,
fuck up
well,
and let me finish?
I mean,
We
you're not
are-
attacking
Hold
my
on,
point,
all
so
both of
not
you stop.
really.
We got to go one at a time. Ollie, you got your point across. We gave you your point across. We got Woo. she'll
Let
get
me
her point
finish.
across. Then
Let
we'll
me
go
finish.
to Connor, and then we'll go to Dom, and that's what
Thank
we're gonna
you.
do. Finish your
Excellent.
point.
So, look, it's because of Taiwan. It is because China is a hostile foreign power. It has been. I know you people never followed foreign policy until about 5 seconds ago, but we actually have other threats in the world. We've got Russia and China. They're a lot bigger a deal to the United States national security than fucking Israel, Palestine. That's a fact. Wick, to come back to this point, I'm sorry, man. You come to these conclusions. I need some goddamned evidence. If you are saying repeatedly in this show, you're saying this is why Congress did this, I need some fucking evidence, man. You've got to show me, like, the person that wrote the bill made a statement saying it's why they did it. Yeah, like, you've got to fucking back that up, because it's crazy.
Then let me back that up.
And
I think
one more thing before you do. And the third thing I want to say here is you guys are repeatedly saying the protests on these college campuses, talking about them like they were benign. Did you watch the same goddamn protests I watched? Because the ones I did had students out there screaming death to Jews. I actually took pictures out there of a protest that I went to. I heard all kinds of anti-Semitic garbage being spewed everywhere. So, like, this stuff is not benign.
I never said it. Okay, you were fighting. Maybe Ali has said that. I have not said that. I'm with your side. I've made I have documented evidence where I've called these, right? I've called these protests specifically pro-war, pro-violence, anti-Semitism goes throughout. So please don't put that on me.
Okay.
That's a shadow you can fight another day.
Okay.
But to back up my evidence, right, we can make inferences based on the data that we have. We know that there is a timeline to these things. We know that there is a reason that politicians put forward bills, put them up for vote when they are. Yes, this has been trying to get passed for a long, long time. That's true, but the fact that it is passed just after these events cannot be ignored. Now, is that concrete evidence that we can go through a court of law? No, but it is something that reasonable people can and should make inferences about in order to widen their worldview. If you have evidence that this was not the case, by all means. But given the fact that A, these things happened and coincided with the college protests, with the rise in calls for cracking down on quote-unquote anti-Semitism from multiple sources, I think that cannot be ignored or hand-waved away. Once again, I agree with you, these protests were not benign. I agree with you that these protests, and we have evidence that they were funded by outside sources that are not friends of America. I think that that's true. But I think that the fundamental freedom that people have in this country, in America, to have their voices heard, even if they're retarded and anti-Semitic and racist, is and should be sacrosanct. Okay, that said, let's go to Connor. Okay, Connor, and then we're gonna go to closing statements because we're coming up on 2 hours here. Go ahead.
Okay, so the thing that I want to be emphasized is that I like universal rules that can be applied to any demographic group. So, for instance, we've talked about how they've been uniquely, in this historical example, been barring Jewish people from access to public spaces, how they've been specifically anti-Semitic, how they've chanted anti-Semitic slogans, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look through history, we have parallels. We brought up the 1964, Civil Rights Act. That was motivated by Black grievance against not having access to public spaces. So when you universalize a rule, what you can do is you can say, hey, as long as you're not promoting a riot, as long as you're not promoting specific crime, as long as you're not vandalizing property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can have a very loud, very obnoxious protest in a public commons area, right? But when you put out the other things, like you can't do vandalism, you can't occupy buildings, you can't beat people up, you can't bar people from public access, that applies as much to the neo-Confederates in the South of the 1960s as it does to some of the pro-Palestinian protesters now. And so as a result, you still have the ability of the state to intervene when it's necessary. And this doesn't require a administrative organization in Oregon to review the speech of students. And so it really the speech of students should not be reviewed unless it's a criminal matter, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, gang, this has been a great discussion. We've had all sorts of... Yeah, this has been great. Let me read a couple super chats and we'll get to closing statements. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about AI girlfriends and boyfriends. So that'll be a fun conversation. A little more lighthearted than what we got today, but still a kind of serious discussion. I'm doing this thing where I guess we're alternating between silly and serious. We had the bear panel yesterday. Tune in if you want a little lighthearted. If you want to be mad, tune in to yesterday's panel. But these super chats. $5 from Chad General Rosencrantz. Also, after Biden's underhanded reversal yesterday, I'm voting Trump. Thank you for the $5, but change your mind. That's a bad idea. $5 from Cameraman 502. The problem I'm seeing is people conflating IHRA working definition. An example, the IHRA presented. Explain why it's not a decent definition to use. Well, the problem is, Cameraman, is that in the bill, it also cites those examples, right? Which is, in my opinion, problematic. That said, thank you for being here. Tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. We're going to give each of these people, lovely individuals, all one and all, an outro. So I hope in your outro you tell people where they can find you if they want to hear more from you, or even if they just want to, tell you suck. I mean, that's fair. We're going to start with Dom, and we're going to end with Brianna Will. So Dom, go ahead.
All right. So I still think this bill is a good thing. It could use some adjustment. I think outsourcing the definition is potentially problematic in the future, but I also don't agree with the idea of the slippery slope and all the other potential problems that we could face, because the teeth of this has existed for decades for other groups, and somehow those other groups managed to not have this bring these problems to our attention. It would the idea that I believe that the reason why this bill was passed wasn't because of the war or anything like that. It's pretty simply put, pressure from constituents, and that pressure is probably a good signal that there's been a jump in anti-Semitism, and therefore a reason for our our Congress that usually can't get anything passed to get this passed. If you hate me, if you like me, you can find me at on X, not Twitter anymore, the Dami Lama. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Gang, give him a follow, give him a sub. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Check him out, gang. Ollie, go ahead.
Yeah, so my problem with is just the definition of anti-Semitism is just way too broad. Anything that can be, applied to anti-Semitism can then be applied to Islamophobia. Wick literally just said, hey, the protests apparently were funded by some outside source who is not kind to America, which, implies in my head terrorism, that now these students are funded by terrorists, right? Which, if you turn around and you say something like, hey, all these pro-Zionists are probably funded by Israel, that's somehow anti-Semitic. But someone saying that the latter is not Islamophobic. So that's, just my take on that. Sociologic with 2 L's on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, whatever you want to find me on. Have fun. Thanks for having me on, Wick.
Thanks for being here, gang. Check him out, find him, give him a sub, give him a follow. We appreciate you. Counterpoints, go ahead.
Yes. In a liberal or libertarian society, which I think America is, you need to have rules that are universal and universal applied. I don't think that you should specify which ethnic group is being protected by a rule. I think it should be, or religious group or race or whatever. I think that it should apply across the board. That way, if you're handing a weapon to one group, then you're effectively handing it to all groups so they can all take advantage of the privilege or right that is extended by it. I think that we talked about negative and positive rights. I think you're giving a positive privilege to people that is going to have a chilling effect on discourse. I think that part of the power of young people inside the United States of America is to have abrasive, horrible, disgusting, racist, Islamophobic, sexist, anti-Semitic conversations, but through those conversations, allow that heat to boil over and then turn into something actually productive. The most valuable conversations I've had in my entire life were with people that I viciously disagreed with, but oftentimes accompanied with some kind of chemical substance, at which point we argued for hours and then came to some level of understanding. So I want that to continue, and I don't want the United States of America to balkanize into a bunch of equally aggrieved minority whiny bitch babies. I want them to be tears in a weird fucked up melting pot. That being said, I do have to jump almost immediately after this. Once Brianna does her closing, if you want to find me, typing Counterpoints 40K into YouTube search, you'll find me.
No, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. Give him a follow, gang. He's great. 𝕵𝖎𝖎, close this up.
I'm going to use my closing statement to attack Connor viciously. You know, we're having a great panel. What is Connor doing? Rolls in late, of course he does, and brings his chaotic alpha male energy and just sends the entire panel off course. It was all polite, and then Connor, you know, of course, 30 minutes if you walk in here, we're screaming at each other. We're hearing completely stupid statements, like the TikTok ban is actually about anti-Palestinian, which is literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm hearing stupid statements like, you know, you're assuming that like when Wick makes a claim, he's referencing a very specific Wall Street Journal article pointing to a very specific American PAC that's behind funding these protests. We hear people leaping to wild conclusions with no evidence as anti-Islamic or whatever. Like, Connor, this is what you do. You just introduce chaos, and you love it. You love it because you're a messy little bitch. You love saying stuff like women are slur children, and just watching it upset me. What's wrong with you, man? What's going on in your mind?
I'm an American, and I love free speech, and I love using it.
Where can people find you, Woo?
Find me on Twitter. It's 𝕵𝖎𝖎. I'm
Okay,
great.
we're rating out. Are you going to still be streaming after this, Counterpoints?
I will. I'll actually
Okay,
be talking
right
to PV, my paid shill organization. So yeah, so come on
Fun.
over if you
I'm sure everyone.
If you have questions,
we're going to rate
no,
into
sorry,
you. I'm sure everyone will enjoy it, right? And treat you with the exact same respect they treated me. But
yeah, and by the way, like I understand that it can be a little bit dry, but if you have specific questions or whatever, now's the time to come and ask an actual PV administrator. So if you've been talking shit everywhere else, now's the time to come in.
beautiful. Okay, wait, bye, game. Bye.